A war horse and his veteran once shared an unbreakable bond forged in the heat of battle. Years after retirement, the horse loses his sight and can no longer recognize the man who risked his life for him. What happens next is a story of courage, love, and the power of an unspoken connection that will leave you in tears. Prepare to witness a tale of healing and redemption that will stay with you forever. The early morning sun painted the sky in hues of orange and gold as Clara walked through the quiet fields of Hope Haven Ranch. Her boots crunched softly on the gravel path, and the air carried the faint scent of dew and hay. In the paddocks, retired service horses grazed peacefully, their lives of hardship replaced by serenity. But not all the animals share the tranquility. In the farthest corner of the ranch, separated from the rest, stood Valor, once a war horse of unmatched courage, now a shadow of his former self. His chestnut coat, once gleaming with health, had lost its luster. His muscular frame was thinner, and his eyes, those eyes that had faced the chaos of battle, were clouded, robbed of sight. Valor stood motionless, his head low and ears flicking faintly at distant sounds, his body a statue of defeat. Clara sighed as she leaned on the fence, watching him. He hasn't let anyone near him in weeks, she muttered to herself, her voice holding equal parts frustration and heartbreak. The horse handlers at the ranch had tried everything to reach him, but Valor seemed locked in his own world, unresponsive to their efforts. It was as if, without his sight, he had given up. Her thoughts were interrupted by the approach of the ranch manager, Paul, holding a letter in his hand. "Clara," he said, handing it to her. "This came yesterday. I think it's our last shot." Clara unfolded the letter, her eyes scanning the words quickly. It was from a man named Captain Ethan Cross, Valor's former rider. The letter was brief but clear. "I'm coming. He saved my life countless times. Now it's my turn to save his." Ethan Cross sat in his modest living room, the morning light filtering through the curtains as he prepared for the trip. On the table, in front of him, was a framed photograph, a younger version of himself in military uniform, standing beside a proud and strong Valor. The horse's mane was braided for the ceremony, his chestnut coat shining in the sun. Ethan smiled bitterly at the memory, his fingers tracing the edge of the frame. "Time wasn't kind to either of us, was it, boy?" he murmured to the empty room. His voice carried the weight of years spent trying to move on from the war, trying to forget the sounds of gunfire and the faces of those he couldn't save. But Valor was different. Valor wasn't just a horse, he was a partner, a protector, and a friend. When the letter from Hope Haven arrived, Ethan didn't hesitate. He packed a bag, filled his truck with fuel, and set out on the long drive to the ranch. The road was quiet, the landscape passing by in a blur of green fields and rolling hills. As he drove, memories of the war surfaced, unbidden nights spent in foxholes with Valor standing watch, the thunder of hooves as they charged across hostile terrain, and the moments of calm when Valor's steady presence reminded Ethan that not everything was lost. By the time he reached the ranch, the sun was high in the sky, casting long shadows across the fields. Clara was waiting for him at the gate, her expression cautious but hopeful. "Captain Cross." She greeted him, extending a hand. "Thank you for coming." Ethan shook her hand, his eyes already scanning the pastures. "Where is he?" he asked, his voice rough with anticipation. Clara gestured toward the far paddock. "He's been distant, and he's blind now, but if anyone can get through to him, it's you." Ethan approached the paddock with slow, measured steps. Valor stood in the corner, his head low, his body stiff. Ethan's heart clenched at the sight. This wasn't the horse he remembered. "Valor," he called softly, stepping closer. "It's me, boy." At the sound of his voice, Valor's ears twitched slightly, but he didn't move. Ethan moved closer, his boots crunching softly on the dirt. "Come on, buddy," he murmured, his voice cracking. "It's me." But as Ethan extended a hand, Valor stiffened and took a hesitant step back, his body tense and wary. The rejection hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. Clara placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "He doesn't recognize you," she said quietly. "Not yet." Ethan clenched his fists, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I'm not leaving until he does." As Ethan stood at the edge of the paddock, Valor's distant figure seemed more unreachable than ever. Could the bond they once shared survive the blindness and years of separation? The first light of dawn spilled over Hope Haven Ranch, casting long shadows across the paddocks. Ethan hadn't slept much that night. He sat on the porch of the guest cabin, sipping coffee and staring at the far paddock where Valor stood. The horse's silhouette was barely visible in the soft morning haze, but Ethan's mind was filled with memories of a time when Valor was vibrant and unstoppable. Clara joined him, holding a clipboard and a steaming mug of tea. "Morning," she said softly, breaking the silence. Ethan nodded, his jaw tight. "He doesn't even know I'm here," he muttered, his voice tinged with frustration. "It's like everything we went through didn't matter." Clara placed the clipboard on the porch railing and sat beside him. "It's not that it didn't matter," she said. "It's that he's been through so much since then. Horses don't think like we do, but they feel, and he's probably felt a lot of fear and loss." Ethan took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair. "So what do I do? Just wait?" Clara shook her head. "No, you rebuild. Slowly, start with the basics. Let him hear your voice and smell your scent. Show him you're here and you're not going anywhere." Determined, Ethan spent the day near the paddock, giving Valor space, but ensuring his presence was known. He spoke to the horse often, his voice low and steady. "You remember the dessert, don't you?" he said at one point, leaning against the fence. "Those long nights when it was just you and me. I trusted you with my life, and you trusted me with yours." Valor's ears twitched faintly, a sign that he was listening. But the horse didn't move from his corner. Ethan sighed, his heart heavy with doubt. How could he break through to the animal that had once been his closest companion? Clara suggested small gestures, offering treats and spending quiet time near Valor without expecting anything in return. Ethan followed her advice, bringing apples and carrots to the paddock every day. At first, Valor ignored the offerings, but after a few days, he began to inch closer, his nostrils flaring as he caught the scent of the treats. One afternoon, as Ethan sat cross-legged in the grass just outside the paddock, Valor took a hesitant step toward him. Ethan froze, not wanting to spook the horse. "That's it, boy," he murmured. "Take your time." Valor stopped a few feet away, his head lowering slightly as he sniffed the air. Then, with deliberate slowness, he reached out and nudged the apple in Ethan's hand. Ethan's heart swelled as he held still, allowing Valor to take the fruit. The breakthrough was small, but it gave Ethan hope. Over the next week, he continued to build trust with Valor, spending hours by the paddock fence and occasionally venturing inside. Valor's posture began to change. He stood taller, his ears perked up more often, and he seemed less withdrawn. One evening, Ethan brought a soft brush to the paddock. He approached Valor cautiously, speaking to him in a soothing tone. "You always loved being groomed after a long ride," he said, holding out the brush. Valor hesitated, but didn't move away as Ethan ran the bristles gently over his coat. As the brush moved over Valor's flank, Ethan felt the tension in the horse's body ease. He worked carefully, avoiding the sensitive areas, and spoke softly about their shared past. "You were my rock out there, you know," he said. "You never let me down." For the first time since his arrival, Ethan felt a glimmer of connection. Valor's head turned slightly toward him, and the horse let out a soft nicker, a sound Ethan hadn't heard in years. Tears welled in his eyes as he stroked Valor's neck. "You remember, don't you?" he whispered. By the end of the week, Valor was allowing Ethan to lead him around the paddock. The change was subtle but profound. Clara watched from a distance, her face breaking into a smile. "He's coming back," she said to Paul, the ranch manager. "Piece by piece, he's finding his way." But not everyone shared her optimism. Paul folded his arms, his expression guarded. "It's progress, sure," he said, "but he's still blind. There's no guarantee he'll ever be the horse he was." Clara's smile faded, but she said nothing. Deep down, she knew Paul was right. Valor's physical scars were permanent, and the bond Ethan was rebuilding wouldn't erase the challenges ahead. As Ethan led Valor back to his stall, the horse stopped suddenly, his body tensing as if sensing something. Was it another step forward or a sign that the past still haunted him? The wind whispered through the trees surrounding the ranch, As the afternoon sun dipped low on the horizon, Ethan stood beside Valor in the paddock, his hand resting gently on the horse's neck. Each day had brought a small victory, whether it was a hesitant nudge, a soft whinny, or the simple act of standing side by side. But even as their bond began to mend, Ethan knew they were far from where they once had been. And that afternoon, Clara approached with a suggestion that made Ethan pause. "We should try taking him out of the paddock," she said, leaning on the fence. "He's gotten used to your presence here, but the real test is how he handles the open trail." Ethan frowned, glancing at Valor. He hasn't been outside this paddock in years. What if it's too much for him? Clara smiled faintly. "It might be, but it's also the only way he'll move forward. You know him better than anyone. If anyone can guide him, it's you." Later that day, Ethan clipped the lead rope to Valor's halter, speaking softly as he guided the horse toward the open gate. "It's just us, boy," he murmured. "Like it always was." Valor's ears flicked, his nostrils flaring as he hesitated at the gate. Ethan stopped, giving him time to adjust. "You're safe," Ethan said, his voice steady. "I've got you." After a long moment, Valor took a tentative step forward. The ranch staff watched in silence as Ethan led the horse down the trail, his hand firm but gentle on the lead rope. Each step was deliberate, Valor's hooves crunching against the gravel path. Though his movements were cautious, there was a determination in the way he carried himself. The trail wound through a quiet forest, the dappled sunlight filtering through the trees. Ethan's voice was a constant presence, narrating their journey. To keep Valor calm, "You remember this," he said. "We used to walk trails like this for hours. You'd always stop to nibble at the bushes, and I'd have to pull you back on track." Valor's ears flicked forward at the sound of Ethan's chuckle, a faint glimmer of recognition breaking through the cloud of his blindness. They continued down the path, the rhythmic sound of their steps creating a soothing cadence. But as they reached a bend in the trail, something unexpected happened. A loud rustling in the underbrush startled Valor, and he reared slightly, his body tensing with fear. Ethan reacted instantly, moving closer to the horse and gripping the lead rope firmly. "It's okay, boy," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the surge of adrenaline. "It's just the wind. You're safe." Valor's breathing was heavy, his body trembling. As he processed the sudden noise, Ethan stood his ground, his presence a steady anchor. Slowly, the horse began to relax, lowering his head and taking a tentative step forward. Ethan exhaled his own tension. "That's it," he said, patting Valor's neck. "We'll take it slow." The rest of the walk was uneventful, but the moment lingered. In Ethan's mind, it wasn't just the noise that had startled Valor. It was the memory of the battlefield, where sudden sound often meant danger. Ethan realized that Valor wasn't just battling blindness, he was also grappling with the scars of their shared past. That evening, as Ethan brushed Valor in the barn, he spoke softly. "You've carried so much, haven't you?" he murmured. "More than I ever realized." Valor stood quietly, his body still, but his ears flicking toward Ethan's voice. The bond they had forged on the battlefield was beginning to resurface, piece by piece. The next morning, Clara met Ethan by the barn, her expression thoughtful. "How was the trail?" she asked. "Better than I expected," Ethan admitted. "But he's still on edge. It's like he's stuck in the past." Clara nodded. "Trauma doesn't just disappear, even for animals. But the fact that he trusts you enough to leave the paddock, that's progress." Ethan smiled faintly, glancing toward Valor's stall. "Yeah, it is." That afternoon, as Ethan worked with Valor in the paddock, Paul approached with an idea. "We've got a group therapy session coming up," he said. "Veterans and their families. I think it'd be good for you two to be a part of it." Ethan hesitated. "You think he's ready for that?" Paul shrugged. "Only one way to find out." Ethan looked at Valor, who stood calmly by his side. The idea of introducing the horse to a group of strangers filled him with apprehension, but he also saw the potential. Maybe this was the next step they needed. As Ethan agreed to Paul's suggestion, he couldn't shake the feeling that the upcoming session would be a turning point. For better or worse, would Valor find the strength to connect with others, or would the ghosts of his past resurface once more? The day of the therapy session dawned with a crispness in the air that hinted at the changing season. Ethan stood in the barn with Valor, brushing the horse's coat until it gleamed. Despite his calm exterior, Ethan's thoughts swirled with apprehension. Would Valor be able to handle the presence of others? Could this session help them move forward? Or set them back? Clara entered, holding a clipboard and offering a reassuring smile. "Are you two ready?" she asked. Ethan nodded, though his grip on the brush tightened. "As ready as we'll ever be." The session was held in a large open field bordered by towering oak trees. A circle of chairs had been arranged, each one soon occupied by a veteran or a family member. The group was a mix of young and old, men and women, all carrying their own invisible burdens. Nearby, a few other therapy horses waited patiently, their handlers keeping them calm. As Ethan led Valor into the field, all eyes turned toward them. The murmurs of curiosity were impossible to ignore. "That's the war horse," someone whispered. "The one that went blind." Ethan's heart raced, but he focused on Valor, speaking softly as he guided him into the circle. "Easy, boy," he murmured. "We're just here to listen." The session began with introductions, each participant sharing a piece of their story. Ethan listened intently, his hand resting on Valor's neck. A young man named Lucas spoke of sleepless nights and the crushing weight of guilt. An older woman, her voice trembling, described the loss of her son and the silence that followed. When it was Ethan's turn, he hesitated, his gaze falling to the ground. "This is Valor," he began, his voice steady but low. "We served together in some of the toughest conditions I've ever known. He saved my life more times than I can count." Ethan paused, his hand tightening on the lead rope. "But when the war ended, we were separated. He was sent here, and I tried to move on. But he's not just a horse, he's a part of me. And I'm here because I owe him everything." The circle was silent for a moment, the weight of Ethan's words sinking in. Then the facilitator, a soft-spoken woman named Grace, gestured toward Valor. "Would you like to let the group interact with him?" she asked. Ethan hesitated, his mind flashing back to Valor's reaction to the trail walk. But then he looked at the horse, which stood calm and steady by his side. "Let's try," he said, his voice firm. One by one, the participants approached. Lucas was the first, his movements slow and cautious. He held out a hand, and Valor sniffed it before allowing the young man to stroke his neck. Lucas's face softened, a small smile breaking through his hardened expression. "Thank you," Lucas whispered, his voice barely audible. Others followed each interaction. Building on the last, Valor remained calm, his ears flicking back and forth as if taking in every word and touch. When the older woman approached, she paused, tears streaming down her face. "My son loved horses," she said, her hand trembling as she reached out. "Thank you for letting me do this." Ethan watched, his chest tight with emotion. Valor, who had once recoiled from any touch, was now standing still, allowing these strangers to connect with him in ways Ethan hadn't thought possible. As the session ended, Grace approached Ethan with a warm smile. "He's remarkable," she said. "And so are you. The bond you share is helping more than you realize." Ethan nodded, his gaze fixed on Valor. "He's the remarkable one," he said softly. "I'm just trying to keep up." Later that evening, Ethan sat outside the barn, staring at the stars. Valor stood nearby, grazing quietly. Clara joined him, a cup of tea in her hands. "That went better than I expected," she said, breaking the silence. Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. "He never stops surprising me." Clara tilted her head, her expression thoughtful. "Do you think he remembers?" Ethan didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced at Valor, who lifted his head and turned toward him as if sensing the unspoken question. "Maybe," Ethan said finally. "Or maybe it doesn't matter. What matters is that he's here now." As Ethan and Clara sat in silence, a car pulled up to the ranch, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Out stepped a man in uniform, holding an envelope that could change everything. What new challenges lie ahead for Ethan and Valor? The sound of the car door slamming echoed across the ranch, cutting through the quiet of the night. Ethan stood from his seat, the tension in his shoulders returning as he watched the man in uniform approach. The envelope in the man's hand seemed to radiate urgency, its presence casting an unspoken weight over the moment. "Captain Cross?" The man asked, his voice firm but respectful. Ethan nodded. That's me. What's this about? The man handed him the envelope. This came from the Veterans Affairs office. They thought it should go directly to you. Ethan glanced at Clara, who stood beside him with a concerned expression. He hesitated briefly before opening the envelope, his hands steady despite the growing knot in his stomach. Inside was a letter, typed and official, but its contents hit with the force of a tidal wave. The letter detailed an initiative by the military to recognize and honor retired service animals, particularly those who had shown exceptional bravery. Valor's name was at the top of the list, and he was nominated for a prestigious award recognizing his service and the lives he had saved. But the honor came with a request. They wanted Ethan and Valor to participate in a national ceremony, a public event that would highlight their story. It wasn't just about recognition. It was about inspiring others and bringing attention to the bond between humans and service animals. Ethan folded the letter and exhaled deeply, his gaze drifting toward the barn where Valor rested. They want us to go back into the spotlight, he said quietly. Clara placed a hand on his arm. How do you feel about that? Ethan shrugged, a mixture of pride and uncertainty clouding his expression. I don't know. Valor's come so far, but what if it's too much for him? The next morning, Ethan brought the letter to Paul and Clara, seeking their input. Paul was enthusiastic, seeing the opportunity as a chance to showcase the ranch's work. This could bring attention to what we do here, he said, and it's an honor Valor deserves. Clara, however, was more cautious. It's a beautiful idea, she said, but it's not just about what the world wants. It's about what's best for Valor. You know him better than anyone, Ethan. Ethan nodded, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He spent the day with Valor, brushing his coat and walking him through the paddock. The horse was calm and responsive, a far cry from the withdrawn and frightened animal he had first encountered. As he led Valor to the edge of the paddock, he spoke softly. What do you think, boy? Are you ready for something like this? Valor nudged Ethan's shoulder gently, his ears flicking forward. It wasn't an answer, but it was enough for Ethan to make his decision. The following week was a whirlwind of preparation. The ranch staff rallied around Ethan and Valor, helping them get ready for the journey. The ceremony was set to take place in a large arena with an audience that included military personnel, families, and members of the press. On the day of the event, Ethan and Valor arrived early to acclimate to the surroundings. The arena buzzed with activity, the sound of voices and cameras a stark contrast to the quiet of the ranch. Valor was uneasy at first, his head turning toward every unfamiliar noise. But Ethan stayed by his side, speaking in a steady voice. You're not alone, he said, his hand resting on Valor's neck. We've got this. As the ceremony began, the announcer recounted Valor's service, his bravery under fire, and the lives he had saved. The audience listened in rapt silence, their eyes fixed on the stage where Ethan stood with Valor at his side. When it was their turn to step forward, Ethan guided Valor to the center of the stage. The lights were bright, and the applause was deafening, but Valor stood tall, his posture calm and composed. Ethan placed a hand on his neck, leaning close to whisper, "You're still my hero." The crowd rose to their feet, their cheers filling the arena as Valor received his award. Tears welled in Ethan's eyes as he looked at the horse who had once been his lifeline. In that moment, it wasn't about the past or the challenges they had faced. It was about the unbreakable bond they shared. As the ceremony ended and Ethan led Valor off the stage, a reporter approached with a proposition that could bring their story to an even larger audience. But was it a step too far or the next chapter in their journey? As the applause faded and the crowd dispersed, Ethan guided Valor to a quieter corner of the arena, away from the flashing cameras and bustling reporters. The ceremony had been an emotional whirlwind, but Valor stood calm. His body relaxed as if he understood the significance of the moment. Ethan rested a hand on his horse's neck, his heart still swelling with pride. A voice broke through his thoughts. Captain Cross. Ethan turned to see a young woman approaching, a microphone in hand and a cameraman trailing behind her. She smiled warmly, her expression a mix of professionalism and admiration. "I'm Rachel Myers with Equestrian Today. May I speak with you?" Ethan hesitated, glancing at Valor. What's this about? Rachel gestured toward the horse. His story. Your story. It's captivated so many people already, but I think it could go even further. We'd like to feature you both in a documentary about the bond between veterans and their service animals. That evening, back at the hotel, Ethan sat on the bed with the proposal Rachel had handed him. The idea of sharing Valor's story on such a large scale was both exciting and daunting. He thought back to the therapy session at the ranch, to the veterans who had found hope in Valor's presence. Maybe this documentary could do the same for countless others. But as much as he wanted to say yes, a part of him worried about the toll it might take on Valor. The horse had already endured so much. Was it fair to ask him to do more? The next morning, Ethan and Clara stood outside the hotel, preparing to load Valor into the trailer for the journey home. What do you think about the documentary idea? Clara asked, her tone cautious. Ethan shrugged, glancing at Valor, who was grazing nearby. I think it could help a lot of people, he admitted. But I don't want to push him too far. Clara nodded. Then let's see how he feels. He's already shown us he's stronger than we thought. Over the next few weeks, life at the ranch settled into a familiar rhythm. Ethan continued to work with Valor, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. The ranch staff noticed the change in both of them. Ethan seemed lighter and more at peace, and Valor carried himself with a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. The decision about the documentary loomed in the background, but Ethan focused on the present, letting Valor guide the way. One sunny afternoon, as Ethan brushed Valor in the paddock, a car pulled up to the ranch. Rachel stepped out, carrying a small camera and a notebook. I thought I'd stop by, she said, smiling. Just to see how you two are doing. Ethan raised an eyebrow but didn't protest. Rachel watched from the fence as Ethan continued grooming Valor, her eyes scanning the horse's relaxed demeanor. He looks incredible, she said softly. You've done an amazing job. Ethan chuckled, patting Valor's flank. He's done the hard part. I just showed up. Rachel stayed for hours, quietly observing and taking notes. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, she approached Ethan with a question. Do you think Valor would be comfortable with the documentary? She asked. Ethan looked at the horse, who was now resting in his stall. After a long pause, he nodded. I think he's ready, and if his story can help even one person, it'll be worth it. The documentary project took months to complete. Rachel and her team visited the ranch regularly, capturing moments of Ethan and Valor's daily life. They interviewed veterans who had met Valor, staff members who had witnessed his transformation, and even Clara, who spoke passionately about the healing power of horses. Through it all, Valor remained a steady presence, his calm demeanor and unspoken strength shining through the lens. The crew was captivated by his story, and Rachel often commented on how much the horse seemed to understand the importance of what they were doing. When the documentary premiered, it was met with overwhelming praise. Viewers from around the world wrote letters and messages sharing how Valor's journey had inspired them. Veterans spoke of finding hope in their own struggles, and families thanked Ethan for reminding them of the resilience within every bond. Ethan and Valor became symbols of healing and second chances, their story a beacon for those navigating their own challenges. On a quiet evening at the ranch, Ethan sat on the porch, watching Valor graze in the paddock. Clara joined him, handing him a cup of coffee. You've both come a long way, she said. Ethan nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. He saved me in ways I didn't even know I needed, he replied, and now he's saving others. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the fields in golden light, Ethan felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. Valor lifted his head, his ears flicking toward Ethan as if to say, we did it together. If this story of resilience and unbreakable bonds touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with others. Let's spread hope and the power of second chances to everyone who needs it.